You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
The only station that matters.
And it's 4:03 a.m. on October 26th. It's a Tuesday in the calendar year 2021. If, and I do say if, we actually can believe that it is 2021. If my eyes look like I just woke up, it is true. Though I do believe I mostly had a decent night of sleep. And I'm ready for the show.
It's an excursion into the odd and into the very, very different.
I know, it's the same old. But does it really matter? Does it really matter? No. And you know what I can't find, are my buddies. My good old buddies. Like my morning. Thank you. No, not those guys. My regular buddies, the buddies,
You're now in a different continuum than the world. You're now in a different continuum than the world. You're now in a different continuum.
Really funny. Really funny. What do you mean I'm funny? It's funny,
Okay, I think we're ready. Does that wake you up? I was watching this thing yesterday. I guess y'all want to know what the deal is with the tooth. I was going to pull out the artwork for the tooth, which is so ridiculous. I could do that too. I don't even know if I still have it in my folder. Let's call it the tooth. Because I'm about to embark on a journey that I'm not really looking forward to. And as the intro said, let's see. I may have taken this out of this little, out of this world and put it into another world. So I have to go back to show content. You can't see what I'm doing. It doesn't really matter. Previous slides. And it's taken a hell of a long time to load. Now, let's see. It should be there, but it's not there. Let's look under daily slides. It should be there, but it's not there. It's got to be in here then. It's just got to be generally in here. Ah, yeah. No. That's interesting. I can't find it. I found the tooth fillings. Where did I hide that thing? I'm pretty sure it was called the tooth. I won't waste much more time on this. But it wasn't a show title, I don't believe. I don't know how it would have gotten in there. Well, this will have to suffice for right now. This will have to suffice for right now. I have a dentist appointment today. Yeah. Does that make you want to, not watch the rest of this show? Oh man,
This is really funny. Really funny. What do you mean I'm funny? It's funny, you know.
Good morning.
That is not a good morning thing. Let's get rid of that. Let's hide that down there somewhere further down below. Somewhere down below the echo dot. Which will change the color of my light bulb to red now in the bar. Ah, yeah. Hot. The title of this show, the password is The Morning Show with Tony C. The title of the show is Souls Nova, Mud Flood, Fiery End, Flash Freeze, Alpha, Zulu, Charlie, Baker. Anyway, I must look like an idiot doing that because I was looking at something else, so I wasn't aware of myself. My Johnson Space Center hat on in my outfit. I guess this will be the outfit I wear to the dentist at 12:20 today. Among ventriloquist. Okay. Onward. Let's get to the weather and then we can get on with the show.
The Weather Watch forecast.
And here's the latest view from NOAA CONUS, a low Earth satellite orbit taken about an hour ago. As you can see, it's still quite the painting minus those, those delineation lines. Yeah. Clouds everywhere. Except the southeast, the Mystery State, and some parts of the Southwest Desert. Yeah. What if there was a state that you didn't know about? Do you think about that? Today's a weird weather day for me in my neck of the woods. The current temperature right now, and I have no idea why this is by the way, for those interested, Bitcoin's like $62. Today it's supposed to rain, an 80% chance of rain. It's supposed to rain all day, basically. It's supposed to start raining any second now. It's 54 degrees, and I thought I saw something moving. I'm hallucinating. Top of everything else. I'm losing my mind. I gotta go place. I gotta walk to a dentist today, and it'll probably be raining. And I don't have an umbrella. The overnight's gonna be 45 degrees. It's like rain, 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 rain. I fixed my roof, and now there's some other new spots opening up. But anyway, as you can see, in some of the higher elevations, probably up in Tahoe, you guys are getting snow. I haven't checked your specific forecast out, but there's a lot of rain up there in the Pacific Northwest, and it's working its way east, and the Great Lakes. There's a little bit of break, up there, but that's not going to last long. And so the upper tier is pretty much just full of clouds. Florida looks like it's the place to be, I guess. Miami, South Beach, those girls are out there with the bikinis and thongs and cleavage and all that stuff. Anyway, that's your...
The Weather Watch forecast.
And that was a nice image to put in your mind, right? What the heck? So do you want to get get all the regular stuff out of the way first, and then we'll get into some nonsense?
Taking you back to the realms and depths of time.
All right. Let's talk music. The featured album today is Steely Dan Countdown to Ecstasy, which is, if you know, people who know Steely Dan, like from radio, you know, like listening to the radio, are probably unfamiliar with this album, really. I mean, this like speaking of teeth, there's a song in there, Your Gold Teeth, which is like this jam. And just to you know, this is the band that's Donald Fagen in the foreground. And you know, this band that they put together for this, Jeff Skunk Baxter, you know, I mean, these were something that he's not Mike McDonald even did some backing vocals in this thing, which before he became like the pop guy. But anyway, that's a picture of them actually at the session of you know, of the record we're talking about. But Countdown to Ecstasy, My Old School, and a song called Bodhisattva were the two big, most notable tracks on there. But this is an album. You know, literally every song is good. Now, you could say that about, you know, I could have put up Asia album with Steely Dan, which is like a classic work of art, you know, and is really out there. And to talk about producing, you know, it's probably one of the top produced records, you know, up there, and definitely in the top of the pops. And I don't mean like pop music. I mean top of the pops and producing, tops of the prods. But, you know, great album cover, you know, great album art. But yeah, it's just, you know, it's just a great album. And it's a college, you know, this was like a college time. I remember this reminds me of college, and it's kind of written around college. Like, I always had this theory, you know, that there's a certain America kind of went through phases. Like, this is just something weird off the top. But like, you had, you know, if you go back to the 20s or 30s, all right, the 40s and stuff, you know, and you think about it, it was like, you know, it was more of a mature culture in the sense that, you know, people wanted to be, the main thing was to be a man, you know, or woman. But I mean, you know, without getting into some kind of thing about, you know, roles of individuals, you know, housewives versus, you know, guy with the briefcase going off to work, you know, that kind of thing. Leave it to Beaver or the Cleavers or, you know, whatever. Father knows best, you know, that weird stuff. But the idea is, you know, going back in time, you know, it's like your politicians were men, like mature men. And, you know, not like Biden, which is like, you know, what the, right? I mean, hardly a man. You know what I mean? I mean, hardly, what is he even? You know what I mean? Or Obama, like, was like a silly little, you know, like goofy guy. Like, you could see him like walking around like a fairy type of thing. And again, don't take that the wrong way. but you know what I'm saying. That's not an insult to, somebody who's gay. That's like, it's like the word homo, we're Homo sapiens sapiens. But it's like if you go back to the movie Animal Farm, where they said, it's like, Obama was like he was just nothing, he was no man. And GW, was like, he wasn't a man. Bill Clinton was like childish, right? You know what I mean? It was this, the Peter Pan culture was already taking over, and it's like, anyway, the modern world, and of course, okay, so let's forget all that, but let's go back and look at Roosevelt, right? Hoover, whether you like these guys or not, this isn't, like I say, I'm not political. I'm a pop culture guy. I'm the king of pop culture, right? What does it say in the back of my book? Of course, it's covered with something right now. The legendary, one of the most, I don't know. You should know. And buy the book, for crying out loud. Or go to Amazon and look at the back cover. But what I'm saying is that, it's like Mount Rushmore. And, of course, even that's controversial today because everybody's like out of their frickin' minds. Yeah, I didn't want to be like in a downer or anything, but it's like, I don't know. Suddenly I'm falling asleep. Excuse me. Narcolepsy. No, I don't have it. But you know what I'm trying to say? I mean, you really do. It's the idea that, society goes through these phases. I mean, the founding fathers of America, like most people don't realize, were a bunch of apart from you see pictures of Ben Franklin and stuff, and then later on George Washington, fighting the Revolutionary War and stuff. But I mean, these guys, 1776, you got to take it back. I mean, these guys were in their 20s and 30s. They were basically a bunch of young, long-haired, idealistic guys, right? I mean, that's who founded America. Yeah, it's just like a part of history. It's meaningless, insignificant in terms of like it. I'm not trying to make a point of specific good, bad, political, non-political, whatever. But yeah, basically they were just a bunch of guys with long hair, beer drinkers. Again, you can't. They took down a Jefferson statue in New York because somebody was offended or something. Because he had a love relationship with a woman who was at a time which was, slavery or something like that. But I mean, basically, had a child with her and loved her. I mean, free in, and basically was involved in this whole thing to free, to free her and others. And people keep forgetting that the entire North. Part of the country, the part of the United States that stayed together, basically freed and put it in. And it's not, the word free is just not fair. Everybody was free because the Constitution is about freedom. So in effect, what they did was they were born into a system. All right. Because these were wealthy people. You have to. See, you don't understand, you don't like me talking like this, I know. But what a lot of people don't understand, maybe you understand this if you're watching this show. I'm sorry for criticizing you in that regard. But I'm talking to like the just general you on the other side of the camera. What people don't understand is a lot of people haven't been around wealth. That still exists today. Do you know what I mean? It's like, people like the Clintons have and people like that, Pelosi's. Do you think Nancy Pelosi puts on yellow rubber gloves, and gets down on her hands and knees when she could have? I mean, she's just an extremely old lady now. She shouldn't even be in politics. She should be sitting on a chair, right? And going to therapy or something, physical therapy to keep her bones and arthritis, from freezing her body up. But I mean, just even, so several years ago, do you think she in recent history got down on her hands and knees, put on the old rubber gloves with a bucket and a sponge next to her, and cleaned around the toilet in the bathroom or the shower? Right? Do you think her husband was fixing things around the house? Mr. I made $5 million on that trade. Thanks, Nance, for talking to Apple and giving me the inside trading tip. No, they have servants. One of the things that a lot of people never even realized with Feinstein, when she had this Chinese spy, on her staff for years, right? Which is highly suspect, okay? But, you don't know what you don't know. But the one thing missing from it, I mean, it's not like it wasn't mentioned, but I mean, the one thing people didn't really dig into or think about, he was her driver. You see? The Asian guy was the driver, the servant. And that's how he got, probably he was able to infiltrate, because these wealthy ruling class, right, have a need for servants. See, they make good speeches on the outside, and it's all political parties. I don't care what anybody says. It goes both sides of the way. All these wealthy people. All right, servants. So you have to understand. So if I were somebody wanted to, so before, if some idiot's out there is trying to go this guy must be a Republican. No, I'm not political anymore. I don't follow any politics anymore. No, I'm not criticizing Nancy Pelosi because she's a frickin', left-wing loon, right? Who's basically his brain isn't in much better shape than Dementia Joe's. Okay? I'm not criticizing her for those reasons. I could if I wanted to, but I really don't care about that. I care about them because they're not in charge. It's a corporatocracy. What I'm saying is that these type of people were born into a certain lifestyle. Some people, the classic silver spoon in their mouth, born into money, born into this kind of situation. It's like Gavin Newsom. He's related to Nancy Pelosi. This is the political ruling class. Did those stooges really think they were going to kick him out of office? Right? The game's rigged, man. It's a conspiracy theory. No, it's rigged in a million different ways. It's rigged in even legal ways. They've got it legally rigged. Like when you run and own the whole system, you don't have to cheat sometimes. It just, you got the whole it's rigged. In other words, they're in charge. That's what people can't get through their thick skulls. But anyway, I'm actually defending Pelosi here, and I'm defending Newsom, and I'm defending Feinstein in a way. What I'm saying is, these people grew up in a culture, and this is modern day culture no less, where they had servants. Now, I call it wage slavery. It's still slavery. Okay? if the best job you can get is wearing those yellow rubber gloves, you know what I'm talking about, and getting down on your hands and knees and scrubbing people's toilets and bathroom floors and cleaning around the base of the toilet bowl where where Feinstein's husband misses when he takes a whiz, right? Okay? And cleaning up dirty sheets. All right? If that's your job, who cares if you get paid for it? All right? That's slavery. It's just called wage slavery. All right? But the ruling elite, they know no better. Oh, let's see. I'm the ruling elite. I'm out on my own. I'm out of college now. We're going to buy this big mansion on the hill. Let's see. We need a driver, servant. We need a cook, servant. We need a house cleaner, right? Servant. We need somebody to, answer the door and do other stuff, a houseman type of thing, servant. So we need at least half a dozen slaves. But we'll pay them. And who will pay them? Their personal assistant, who is the house blank, right? Another slave, the personal assistant that does all the, that work, which in another day and age would have been the house blank. Okay? Do you understand that? See, people don't, they don't get stuff. I'm going to get into other stuff and get into how this applies to Steely Dan and get in the end of the world and all that kind of stuff. So just stay with me. This is important because, the way people change and where your life. I'm sorry I'm on a roll, it's just one of those.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
These shows start out sometimes like this, and that's just the way it goes. All right? I'm pouring coffee. And you don't have a frickin' dentist appointment today, okay? So, whatever. Let's get rid of that. So what I'm saying is Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and the founding fathers, these were nice guys. Now, some of these guys, they say George Washington at a certain point was one of the richest men in America. Did you know that? They wanted him to be king, and he turned it down. And people have the audacity to criticize these guys, right? He said, "Whoa, what do you think we just fought the war for?" Right? So people don't know history, and that's what we're going to get into. But we're going to get into history of catastrophe, and just so people, in case somebody's tuned in, if they haven't already tuned out, wherever I have this thing, here it is. The giver of life, light, heat, and eventually a catastrophe like no other. Okay? That's what the show is going to be about. Just hang in there, man. This is just chill. I want to explain something here. It's important because there's other factors that lead into everything. Nothing is that simple. That's the problem with the meme and the tweet and the post and all that shit. It's like people don't give you context and build up to something. Everything's short, right? And then so you don't understand. You don't get it. I'm trying to explain something. This is pop culture, so listen the fuck up, man. So Jefferson, so these guys were, they were getting together in pubs and in these little places, and they were drinking beer. Jefferson was a brewer and made, basically liquor, spirits. Franklin, I brewed beer and was a drinker. So these guys sat around, in their 20s and early 30s, and they were sitting around drinking beer, hanging out, and talking like, hey man, this system's fucked up. And that included this idea of like way of slavery and everything else. And they wanted freedom, but they were born into a situation and lived in houses and places where this was commonplace. Do you understand? And the South was like that too. Right? That's that whole thing about like Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben and stuff, who was, by the way, who was like some gourmet chef, But the point was, you're looking at people born into a culture and a way of life. All right? And you're forgetting that this is the revisionist history. Like the United States didn't start in 1776. All right? All right. When did Columbus, come over? When did it, Plymouth Rock, do you understand? People were here like centuries before this. And it was like the Dutch and the British trading companies, and there were African and Middle Eastern slave traders, the Spaniards. People don't understand. See, they don't go to history, right? You see? And understand the roots. And so it was the so-called people that we call the founding fathers, when they take down a Jefferson statue. All right? He was born into a system that he ultimately, in his individual case, ended. He fell in love with a woman and had a child with her, and and ended that whole servitude thing with her. People don't know that. That's like they leave that part out. In other words, he was, his whole reason was, and many of the people who fought, they were fighting for freedom for everybody, every race, creed, color, and religion. All right? And that's left out of history, especially these people now who are trying to do this, critical race theory and teach these lies, because they refuse to put things in perspective or timelines. You see? The timeline. And they have no concept because they're not traveled. They've never been around a wealthy house. You see? I mean, I've been everywhere, so I know. I've been in houses today. You could go in houses today. All right? Even in Silicon Valley, where you got some of these, like the most ridiculously people who are trying to pretend they're like so open-minded. All right. I've been in a gay married couple's house for dinner when I was married. We used to know this couple. My wife worked with one of the guys, and went over to their place, and they were like dripping rich, and they had servants. Okay. All right. That's how it was and is and still is. All right. That's slavery. Okay, it's the same thing. I call it wage slavery. It's still slavery. It's servitude, indentured servants. All right? They're stuck there. And people work there their whole lives. They have nowhere to go, and that's their lifestyle. Some people follow it. Some of it's generational. I just want to put that in perspective. Okay, that's number one, like where people... Number one, where people just don't understand life, okay? So I'm talking, what I really want to get into, Steely Dan probably wouldn't appreciate this, but the idea is that societies, civilizations, whatever you want to call them, go through phases of maturity. Like what is, and I mean, you could get into it in terms of pop culture too, but this isn't so much pop culture, but it feeds into this. So in the early days, it was a bunch of young guys. All right. And there were women, but I mean, like I say, you're born into a time in history. It's like you don't really have a frickin' choice. Okay? And you don't know any better. And so the reason why you shouldn't take down a Jefferson or Washington statue or somebody like that is that unlike most people who are oblivious when they're born into a certain age, a certain lifestyle or something, those guys actually had like this, the brains, like I always say, like I try to look at stuff, to look around and go, wait a second, man, this is screwed up. There's something wrong with this. This is fucked up. Fuck the King of England. And screw this. We need freedom for everybody. And we're going to make a Declaration of Independence and eventually form a government and have a constitution and a Bill of Rights and blah, blah, blah. And that's what those young people did. And by the time they were done, they were men, and some of them eventually were old men. All right. Now, this was a big country, and it went through a lot of different changes. Louisiana Purchase. You know what I mean? The Spanish-American War. I mean, there were all kinds of things going on. Right? People, that are just like, people don't see this in the big picture, the total context. How the South developed and commerce down there. Right. And all that culture, and that there had been basically a century had gone by or more, 2 centuries of this, servitude, slavery, whatever you want to call it. All right. So, it's not so easy to say, okay, that's just the way it was for hundreds of years. So you were born into something, and it's like, this is the way, this is life for hundreds of years. So hats off to the guys and the girls, but I mean, it was mostly men in those days. That's just a way. And again, they were born into that cultural way of life, that said, hey, we got to change. And there was time for change again. And then that was around Civil War times. And as in the earlier days, those that were for freedom won and fought and died, and many died. They died fighting for the freedom of people they didn't even know. You see? They didn't even know. They're heroes. They fought for the freedom of people they didn't even know. And the same has gone on in Afghanistan with U.S. troops, in Iraq, Syria, of course, the Vietnam War and everything. But in areas that you're not even aware of. All right? Where U.S. soldiers and people are fighting for freedom for people they don't even know. And that means us, people at home who are not currently, in uniform, and people there fighting for freedom for those people. Okay? And many of those people and those people who fought in Vietnam and these other wars are now men and women, middle-aged and old. Some are old by now. It was the late 60s, 70s. 60 years ago. You're 20 years. People are 80. They 80-year-old. There's 80-year-old guys who fought in Vietnam. My dad fought in the he died years ago, but he fought in the Korean War. But what I was trying to get at is that you had young people found this country. By the time the country became a country, because they fought for it, they literally had a revolutionary war to push back the king. And remember, it's independence from England Day. I'm sorry, my friends in the UK, but it's independence from England Day on July 4th. And for you Canadians to the north, the War of 1812, Canada was part of the crown, and so it was literally through Canada attacked the U.S. and burned down the U.S. Capitol in 1812, and Francis Scott Key wrote the Star-Spangled Banner, the bombs bursting in air. Those lines are from Canada, proxy for the U.K., the king trying to take back America. The frickin' Canadians attacked the U.S. in the War of 1812, and that's why we have fireworks on Independence Day, which is independence from England and the King System Day. And now you got these people who look at presidents, I don't care who they are, like, oh, he's the leader of the free world. No, he isn't. He's fucking nobody. In this case, he's some just fucking average Joe. Literally. The big guy. Right? Just an average fucking Joe. When they said, Washington, we want to make you king, he said, what the heck do you think we were fighting for? Not going to be king. We just lost all these people died because we fought against the king system. So even back then, you could see people are fucking morons. Didn't even know in their own fucking time. So anyway, you got young people who basically saw the injustice back in the founding fathers, all right, who deserved statues, okay? Because while that was the they were born in the status quo. It's not their fucking fault. Right? It's just Jefferson's fault for slavery. He was born into it, just as anybody who was a slave was born into it at that time. It had existed for centuries. But Jefferson, guys like that, had the mind to see that this was an injustice. All right? He was no racist. He has a girlfriend and had a child with a black woman. It would be the perfect plot in a movie today, because that's the plot in every movie today, right? Jefferson was in love with a black woman and had a child with her. He didn't treat her like crap. He took her to France with him. Right? And he didn't, and she was, he didn't enslave her. She was no longer a slave when. People don't understand that. So a bunch of young guys found this country drinking beer and shots, fought a war for freedom. Not only was it the Declaration of Independence, but created a Constitution and the Bill of Rights. All right? There were all kinds of craziness things happening because this is a giant country, and a lot of these people who have these criticisms, like these people in Brooklyn that took down New York, was it New York or Brooklyn or Philly? Which I don't know where it was. I think it was New York. These aren't traveled people. They don't realize. I literally traveled in a car by myself throughout this country over years, decades. They don't know this world. They don't know the South. The South was the South and whatever, and then that was solved. That problem was solved in the 1860s. And then a new wave of immigrants came in from Europe, and they were men, all right, and children. But then you had, in the early part of the 20th century, you had your politicians and your people leading people were adults, in a sense, right? They were men. Manly men, you know, and like in that stupid TV show, 2.5 Men, no, whatever it was, that show with Charlie Sheen, you know, and so, and then after the war, you know, because it was soldiers and the soldiers were young, and it was young families and stuff. And then it was like America was born anew again in the 50s. And it was rockabilly, rock and roll, and, you know, shake, rattle, and roll. And Elvis Presley, and then rock in the 60s and stuff. And it was like, it was teen angel, or whatever, you know? It was teens, right? Because the kid, you know, the baby boom. And so pop music is where we're getting into this album and where this all makes sense. And how this all ties together, pop culture and history and life, liberty and the pursuit of happiness. And so America was once again young, all right? And so in the late 50s and the 60s, America was basically, we were teenagers, the whole country. That was the movement, you see? All right? That was pop culture. And then as it moved in, then it became high school into like college, which was Woodstock, right? And then this culture, so the music and pop culture grew. So you no longer had Frank Sinatra, a man, you see, being the number one, or Bing Crosby being the number one, Andy Williams being the number one stars, or Perry Como. Those guys were still around, but they were around for that leftover age group of the manly men and women from the previous generation. Do you see? The parents. But pop culture, remember, is popular. That's what pop stands for. Popular culture. Pop culture was youthful. And so it had gone from teen, you know, into college and Woodstock. And then that was it. And so by the 70s, and then the war finally ended, Vietnam. And so people were in their 20s now, heading into the 30s. And remember, in the 80s, the number one show on TV was called 30-something. You don't know that. See, people don't follow pop culture. I am the king of pop culture. That's the one thing. That's why you should read my books. I have 10 books. All right? I know all this stuff. I've been following this stuff my whole life and writing about it, singing about it, talking about it. All right? So Steely Dan Countdown to Ecstasy was at college. Was when more people started going to college. And so this whole thing that I rattled off for almost 50 minutes was to bring you to the idea that this is an album that was made, and if you listen to it, for college and post-college age people. And at the time of that album, and if you look at music of that era, and you could go back to 69 in Woodstock, and you will see, you know, and then back into the 60s, and it was Teen Angel, right? You see what I'm trying to say? There was this movement of pop culture that kind of went with the flow of what they call the boomers and whatever, and society had grown, and then it was 30-something by the 80s. Anyway, it's a very long history, pop cultural lesson. I hope I got through to you and made some sense with it. I didn't mean to, I don't like to yell at you, you know. But anyway, this album is well worth getting your voice assistant to play you that album. All right, if you don't own a digital copy of it. And I'm sorry for guys, who, are somehow against voice assistants or whatever. They, I don't. My only problem I have with voice assistants is they don't have AI. They're not far enough. They need to make them even more. They need to make them to communicate with you. See, Echo Dot, the A, can't say it because she's in the other room, and then it's going to respond or stay open or something. I can just say the name anytime I want to. The problem with Apple Siri is like, hey, Siri, play Steely Dan. You see, nothing. I got an iPhone sitting over there. You got to press a frickin' button, right? Or like be on your hooked up to iTunes at the time or something weird like that or whatever. It's not as sophisticated as Amazon. Hate to say that, but Amazon's Echo Dot is a step ahead. So what I'm waiting for, though, is for Amazon to put some more AI into it so that it could be conversational. Because while I can say, hey, blank, play Steely Dan's Countdown to Ecstasy album, and it will do it, or turn on this and do that, I have some of those things that it will functional thing. Excuse me. Things that it will do for me. It needs to be more conversational. And that's the next level. And once that happens, these things, that's what I'm saying. That's when these things are going to start to become a lot more obsolete. Okay? Because and that's the part that they're resisting. And they're trying to put all kinds of stuff in the smartphones, like the camera thing. Notice the new Apple, it's like all invested in, it's really invested in the camera and the visual aspect, like the FaceTime, party, lockdown, let's all get together even though we're not together type of stuff, which is ridiculous because we should be just getting together, And the technology should be, this whole thing should be cured by now. And not with it should be like just, it's the year 2021, I think. We don't know. They probably messed around with that. And that's what we're going to get in the second half of this show. So Steely Dan was when America was in college. And some were just getting out of college. That's what this album is. So if you listen to this album, that will put you in that mindset and you will understand everything I just said. And hopefully the earlier stuff that seemed to touch on political and social issues and stuff like that made some sense and might help you better understand something that is being thrust down people's throats that they just don't understand because they're fools. Anyway, that's that. So, Steely Dan, great band, great album, great singers, songwriters, producers, musicians, just, extraordinaire is the best way to say it. Excellent album. And, of course, their subsequent work was, excellent. I mean, they've just kept producing. And they got better with time. So, that's that. Now we can get to the show. Now, on with the show. The sun, the giver of life, light, heat, and eventually a catastrophe like no other. I want to talk about, before I get totally into this, and by the way, I do have some news here. We'll just go through this. I hate the news. You know I'm not into the news. But let's look at this. Zuckerberg accuses whistleblowers and media of plotting against Facebook. Screw him. He's just an idiot. There's no, nobody's plotting against him. This cyclone that hit the West Coast we talked about yesterday, Yosemite Falls roars back to life. Great. Okay. So what? Good. Okay. Fantastic. Who cares about this guy, right? I mean, like I said, 20,000 people, homicides a year in the U.S., and they decide to pick up and make a big story about one fucking guy, girl, and whatever. Who gives a shit, right? And why is that news? What about the other 19,000 families, friends, relatives, and all those other people that died every fucking year, like on the magnitude of 20,000 a year, every 5 years, 100,000? All right? Most of which go unsolved. And this Xi guy isn't showing up at some COP26 UN climate change conference in Glasgow. Of course he's not going to show up. What does he give a shit for? Did you read about that, how they turned down the coal from Australia and stuff? Everything Chinese communists do is a freaking lie. All right, they got one thing in mind. Their 5-year plan is world global domination, for crying out fucking loud. All right, I mean, the poor people of China, there's nothing you could do about it. But again, they were born there and born into it, which ties into what I was talking about earlier. I don't blame them. You can't blame the Chinese no more than you could blame some Southerner. All right. Who fought for the Confederacy or something, right? They were just born there. That's their life. They didn't know any better. And these people in China, they frickin' know any better. And you have to. It takes a while. And there's news blackouts in China, so they don't even know the truth. And in our case, in the U.S., there was no news, right? You had to wait maybe once a week, some guy in some place. People lived in towns and counties. They didn't even have newspapers. Nobody knew what was going on. People would get a telegraph, which brings us into the Carrington event, which is the sun. Everything's about the sun. The climate is about the sun. Life is about the sun. Now, this is really weird. Lately, this is weird things. Okay? And we're around that. It's that time of year, where it's like all this weird stuff. It's like, all this kind of goofy stuff. Happy Halloween. So, lately, because I watch YouTube since I don't have the news, I got rid of TV. And when I had it, I didn't watch news anyway. Screw that. Spent a lifetime in the business, so to speak. So it's like I said, when you know something, so it's all bullshit. It's all showbiz. It's all showbiz. Showbiz Kids is another song that was on that Steely Dan album. Or that's a line. Showbiz Kids making movies of themselves. They don't give a fuck about anybody else. You go to. Anyway, check that music out. The giver of life, light, heat, and eventually a catastrophe like no other. So just randomly, these things show up on my recommended list for no known reason, whatever. And there was some guy, remember a couple of shows ago, I talked about the mud flood. And then I talked about we don't know what time it is. Does anybody know what time it is? And the idea about how they messed with the time, right? The years. And while that's argued and, some people think they have it's a case closed, it didn't happen. They didn't, there isn't a missing 40 or 700 or 400 years or something like that. And it people did have some kind of rationality for the mud flood, but they don't really. Well, anyway, I saw this guy who got really in depth into it last night. It just showed up on my recommended list on YouTube, so I watched it. It was about 40 minutes long. It was pretty long form. Could have been an hour. Could have been a long form thing like my stuff. And this guy has his act together, and apparently he's been doing this stuff. And he had all the research, and he had a lot of photos, these guys who really get into it. It was a produced video, not like me. I just wing this stuff. I literally pulled together a couple photos. I just pulled together the pictures of Steely Dan, 5-10 minutes before I went on the air, because I was thinking about doing the Steely Dan album today. And, the satellite photo I just grabbed because I wanted the latest satellite from CONUS, so I could give you an accurate picture of what the planet looks like. So I just put this stuff together real quick. I'm winging it, And so if I'm when I'm doing something like this,
Scream.
I'm just digging that out. And I'm playing that live from that computer to this one. But anyway, so no, this guy produced it and put together a pretty good, really pretty good compilation of everything, and was backing it up with as much imagery and factual data that's available. And he was covering all these topics, like the stuff I've been talking about lately, which is so weird. And, it just makes you wonder, and that's been happening a lot lately, just a lot of, I've used the word concurrences. It's just I don't know. I'm not trying to get into the metaphysical, necessarily, though, obviously consciousness. I am a believer in consciousness. I wrote a book, Codex, and it deals with the hard problem of consciousness. And I am of the belief that your consciousness is separate from your bioelectric brain. So in effect, that's metaphysical, and that your consciousness is lives on. I don't know if the word live is right, but exists, in some way, shape, or form, and whatever it is. And that your brain is more like a radio or television receiver type of thing. We've talked about that before. But anyway, so the it's not like I believe in concrete metaphysical ideas that are addressed, by science, such as the hard problem of consciousness, in which is a current contemporary argument among serious neuroscientists. Anyway, so, there's just, very strange things, and, we don't know. And this whole idea of magnetism, the Earth's magnetic field's messed up. And that everything that we've done, in modern days, technologically wise, seems to have been electromagnetic. You think about it. Right? Even the there's been this, I'll use the word march of time often. There have been changes and advancements I mean, the whole move to silicon, which ultimately is why they call it Silicon Valley. In other words, to replace, the tube, the electron tube, so to speak. But in computing, we recorded on magnetic tape, audio, Frank Sinatra. Yeah, when in the original recordings were actually, if you go back to, the Edison spool, it was a spinning spool. And so how a record is played was that, in effect, the vibration, the needle recorded, and then the needle ultimately played back. And that's how we created, the platter, the vinyl, record. But then we got into magnetic tape, electromagnetism, right? And the Earth's magnetic field is weak and it's kind of out of whack right now. It's like beyond weak, it's just out of whack. It's something that's not really reported properly. And this guy was getting into that, which was really nice to see. Because a lot of people just say, well, the Earth's magnetic field is weak, and that's why we're having, a lot of anomalies here on the planet. And, of course, we have the anomaly in the South Atlantic. And that also affects storm patterns, and all kinds of other things, jet streams and all that. I mean, anyone who believes that climate crisis has anything to do with 0.004 CO2, I think you just go back and watch a couple of my shows. All right. It's the sun and it's magnetic fields. It's electromagnetism. All right. It has nothing to do with some trace element, some trace gas. All right. This is a nitrogen planet. 70% of the atmosphere is nitrogen. 20%, these are rounded figures. Some 20% is oxygen. Almost close to 1% argon, right? Most people don't even know what argon is, right? And the rest are trace elements. Just add it up. Okay. 70-some% nitrogen, 20-some% oxygen, almost 1% argon. All right. You're in the 90s. All right. And then the rest are like a bunch of different things. And one of those, 0.004%, is CO2. And that measly amount of CO2, which I say we could definitely use more to get better growth, more plants and whatnot. A greener planet, right? What happened to the Green Party, right? Is the thing that allows us, the trees to grow, flourish, and plants to yield food, and all flowers, all the flora to produce oxygen that we breathe and keep that atmosphere, that higher level of oxygen in our atmosphere. So it's the sun that controls the climate. The sun gives us life, photosynthesis to the plants, and photosynthesis for us. It's just a different kind of photosynthesis. We get vitamin D from it. It boosts our immune system, and it activates like 1,000 different receptors in our bodies. The sun is the giver of life for humans and plants, for all life on this planet. And it gives us heat, and without that heat, we couldn't survive. And light we need. Civilization needs light. All right? The cycle of life, night and day, and all of that. Okay? But then there's this other thing, electromagnetism. Now, the sun has a magnetic field which protects the solar system, and then the individual planets have their own magnetic fields that protect them from some of the solar rays, but all in concert, we're protected from cosmic rays, right? This stuff that's out there, that basically could totally distort, and mess with our chromosomes, our DNA and everything. And, mutation, that's how mutations occur. So what people have to anyway, so I just happened to run across this guy who was saying this stuff. Coffee's gotten warm, but he was more into like the mud flood thing, and he had some very compelling stories about that, which a lot of people don't even know happened. And just to briefly bring you back into that, in case this is the first time you've ever seen this show, and you don't know who the heck I am and all this kind of nonsense,
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
Like in Paris, for example, in places in Europe, just literally like 2 centuries ago, say, roughly. But there may be this 400-year solar cycle. Like there's weird solar cycles that we're not aware of. Most people are aware of of solar maximum and solar minimum, right? It's like this roughly 11 years some cycle. And then there's like grand solar minimum and grand, that kind of thing. There's a thing called, you might have heard the word Maunder minimum and, different things like that thrown around. But there's like these various cycles that go, from, people talk about the storm of the century, and different things like that, which is funny when it comes out of the mouth of like a newsreader who's like pro this climate crisis stuff. I always laugh at it. They say like, this was the worst storm in 30 years. And I'm going like, okay. Or they'll say, this is the storm of the century. This hasn't happened. This is the worst flood in 100 years. And I'm going, okay. That means it happened 100 years ago? Well, then what the heck does it have to do with CO2? It's like the Dust Bowl in the 30s, 90 years ago. Yeah. I mean, they, it's not even worth like arguing about. And I constantly say this, did you ever get a sunburn or suntan in the summertime? Did you ever notice that at nighttime it's cooler and when the sun's out it's warmer? All right, where do you think, okay? Where do you think it comes, the heat, the climate, how it's changed and, what directs it? Axial tilt, precession, right? The whole manner in which the earth, the seasons and everything. And then there's grand cycles and all that stuff. And it's like, I'm not going to get into that. I have shows that were dedicated entirely to that. So, but just briefly get into this, just this mud flood idea. Just this idea that history, you don't know what year. We really have no proof that it is the year 2021. And that sounds like, I've said this before, and I know sounds like a ridiculous statement. But there's nothing you can do to prove to me that this is the year 2021. You just can't prove it. And then there's this mud flood. And you're going like, what the heck? Why you keep, okay, what's a mud flood? Well, you can look under cities and you could find that they built cities on top of cities, but not like Rome built on top of Rome, which they did. That stuff happened too. Okay, but you go back a couple thousand years, it's a different story. All right. But even so, what this guy was trying to say, he was even going against like what Hancock says about Göbekli Tepe. Hancock believes that Göbekli Tepe was intentionally buried, and I think I might have parroted that once in a previous video many moons ago. But the fact of the matter is, what this guy was saying is no. The reason it seemed uniform or as if it was intentionally buried was because it was the mud flood. You're going, what's the mud flood? Well, there was this catastrophic event that occurred. All right. And, you know, it had to do with climate, and it was basically caused by a solar event. All right. That happened with certain frequency. And some of these things, like they believe, happen every 12,000 years, 6,000 years. You know, some may say 1,000 or so, others 400, right? Some even less than that. We know that the solar cycles are every 11 years or so. And it could just be the fact that certain solar cycles, you know, certain of these solar minimums and maximums just are, you know, over the top. And then maybe it's not even a cycle. And so the guys who are trying to cyclically take this to 12,000 years, like I have and I am, and I lean that way, I must admit. But I may be wrong in that regards, because the fact of the matter is, it could just mean that 12,000 years ago or 6,000 years ago, the so-called Noah's flood time, right? Time, the Great Flood, all the flood stories were around that time, approximately. That just could have been a fluke or a very intense maximum or minimum or whatever, you see? So the cycle could just be 11 years. It just could be that every so often. So it could be random. But there's this other school of thought that look at this cyclically, and who have looked into anthropology and archaeology, right, and studied the history of, you know, humans, civilization, and have come up with this idea that this is like a 12,000 year repetitive cycle of catastrophe, Earth catastrophe, which is a near extinction event. My garbage man is coming. A lot of stuff from my attic is in there. My attic's still a mess. Excuse me. I still have a lot of work to do on that. It's going to be an ongoing project for this entire year, well into next summer, until I finish what I want to do. I'm going to literally cut a hole in my roof and build like a trap door. Just a question of whether or not it's just going to be a trap door to access the roof and seal the holes myself without having to get on the roof, like just basically head and hands out, like fixing, and actually open the trap door where the two big holes are. So like that'll be one part I don't have to cut open. The other idea is to have it not just a trap door that seals. Like what I'd really like is, you know, you see on a ship, you know, where you turn to make it the door to make it watertight, or like you see in a sci-fi movie, they, you know, in a spaceship to make it pressurized. Same thing. I wish I can get one of those. That'd be cool. Put on my roof. But otherwise, maybe what I'll do is when I cut open this thing, I'll replace it with a skylight. But I'll have to use one of those like plastic dome one-piecers that I could easily just have a gasket around it, and it's not going to create more leaks. Because skylights are notorious for leaking. I've had skylight before I put in a place. if they're not put in properly, you could get leaks. You have to be really, you got it. It's best to have this one piece thing, and you really have to make sure that the gaskets around it, the sealing around it is tight. Anyway, that's an ongoing thing I got to deal with. But it's all climate, and we're entering into some crazy times weather-wise. See, there's no doubt that this planet is heading into some serious climate and, well, beyond climate. It's like the La Palma volcanic eruption and the uptick in earthquakes and volcanoes and stuff. This is all based upon magnetic problems, solar problems, magnetic fields, electromagnetism, all kinds of stuff like that. It's like this garbage truck just idling in front of my house. I wonder if he realizes I have that stuff in that bag is filled with. If they open that bag, man, I got all these cans of great stuff. I don't think you're supposed to throw that stuff out, but I mean, recycling and all that stuff is a fraud to begin with. I don't know. Unless it's the spies going through my garbage thinking they're going to find something. Sorry, fellas. I'm just a guy talking about conspiracy theories in your mind. So anyway, these things happen. All right. And have happened over time. There it goes. Actually, it was a bus. It was a bus, not the garbage truck. Today is trash day, though. It's 5:25 a.m. in the morning of the 26th of October in what we believe to be the year 2021 in the former United States, which was once part of Western civilization, which has since collapsed. And that is reality. And anyone who's in denial of that is a fool. So, yeah, we're in for a lot of earth changes. I used to be a part of a group around the year 2000, late 1990s, on the internet. Yahoo groups, they don't exist anymore. It used to be Earth Changes was the name of that. And my show used to deal with earth changes. One of my earlier shows I used to do over 20-some years ago. I was webcasting. So, yeah, we're in store for a lot of earth changes. There's no doubt about it. And there's a good possibility that sometime within the next, between now and, say, 20-some years from now, that we could see a near extinction event of the likes that occurred some 12,000 years ago. And 24 and 36, 48, and so on, back previously. And so civilization only lasts that long because of the sun. That's the theory, the going theory right now. And so all that's left, because of the nature of this cataclysm, if you read my book, both in Codex and I believe in my latest book, I talk about it. But I advise you to buy both the print versions of Codex and Then What, which is, you can see a picture of it on the screen over on your, what is it? Your left? I can't tell, man. The screen is backwards. All right. It says Then What? Where do you see Then What on the screen? That's the book. Buy it. And so over that vast amount of time, what survives? We're talking 10,000 years. We're talking 12,000 years, actually. But I mean 10,000 years to round it down. Think about that. You know, and some people say, well, styrofoam, plastics. But I disagree with that. Because, you know, these guys that have been, and girls, whatever, these people that have been trying to deal with this ocean, you know, everybody's heard about these, you know, islands of plastic in the ocean, right? That, of course, you know, people like Governor Newsom in California and stuff, they allow that dumping in the ocean, right? Though some of the stuff comes from China and other places. But I mean, you know, it's the same on the East Coast, you know, and that's not the only one. There's various locations of these floating, you know, little islands of plastic and trash, right? But what they found when they've gone out, there are efforts now, and there's some private funded efforts to clean this stuff up. And I came up with the solution myself a long time ago, but I think that some of these guys are onto it. And if they're not, I hope they figured it out. But the idea is to take these trawlers out there, scoop up this stuff, and then bring it back and take it to these places that recycle these kind of plastic things where they turn it into little tiny plastic pellets. And then in turn, those things are converted in everything from like North Face jackets to, you know, maybe this container is recycled, right? And then it just goes on and on and on so that we could clean up these plastic islands and actually use this as free raw materials, all right, you know, for everyday items. You know, I'm all for recycling, you know, recycle, renew, recycle, you know, that kind of thing. Why not? You know. But what some have found is that some of these islands of plastics have disappeared, you know, or have been diminishing. And yes, you know, unfortunately, aquatic life has consumed some of this stuff, and that's a real tragedy, you know. But like I say, this is pollution, and this is caused by these so-called hypocrite governors in these, you know, states like New York, California, Washington, you know, Oregon, you know, these so-called progressive type of people. But they allow this stuff to happen. You know, they know what's going on. You know, it's like the fine for insider trading in Congress. It's a $200 fine. So Pelosi's husband made $5 million on an insider trade that she got in insider info from Apple. But she's not even mentioned as one of the people that they're prosecuting, not even prosecuting, but I mean who are being chastised or whatever. But if she were, she would get a $200 fine. And that's the same with these people who are dumping these garbage, you know, barges and stuff out into the ocean. They get a fine, but it's a cost of doing business type of fine. It's like no big deal to them. So there's no incentive for them to stop dumping. But what they found is that this stuff is like somehow going down, sinking, breaking down in a surprising way. And this is only in a matter of years, you know. So what you have to understand is that, you know, and a lot of people don't, because people don't understand that we're a carbon-based life form. You and I are carbon-based life forms. This is a carbon-based planet, right? In other words, this planet is basically predominantly, it's a water planet because it's mostly water, but I mean, the land masses, it's mostly trees and flowers, you know, and they're carbon based. You know, they need CO2, you know, that's their thing. So it's their world. It's not ours. You know, the moment you get up above the clouds, you know, you can't even see a human. You know, we're an insect, right? But you can see trees and forests and rolling hills and all that stuff and oceans. See what I mean? So it's their world, not ours, right? And so as much as these climate crisis, you know, lunatics, you know, town criers would like to make you believe that the impact of 0.004 CO2, man-made this, man-made that, is not as catastrophic as they make it out to be, and that it's almost in many cases they're blaming things that this sun, which I have on my screen, and electromagnetism and long-term cycles of life and the planet and, you know, the solar system, the galaxy, etc. It's just the nature of how things work. They're blaming that kind of stuff, everything on this 0.004 CO2. And there could be nothing more like preposterous. And they really think we're idiots, right? And somebody will say, yeah, but scientists. Yeah, but those scientists, yeah, they believe it. But they were taught that in school by other people who were taught it, and they were taught revisionist history. They were taught lies. In other words, the foundation, all right, the premise is a flawed premise from the very start. And just like I'm trying to get into plastics, and I know there's some chemists out there that if they were watching this, they'd be like, no, you don't understand, you know, plastics were discovered as a byproduct during the heyday of, you know, when we were just digging everywhere for oil, okay? And it was sloppy, and the oil fields were sloppy, and there was this stuff spilled all over, and they started to notice they're trying to refine this stuff into some kind of fuel, and they noticed that this stuff was like filming up, like it was turning into a film, this stuff that's on the ground and stuff, because it was very, it wasn't, the industry was new, you know. They were wildcatters, you know, people like that, you know. And, you know, they didn't even know what to do with this stuff. And then eventually, like in the line in the movie The Graduate, right, where the guy says to the Dustin Hoffman character, plastics, right? Because plastics were free. It was basically a byproduct of this fuel that, you know, was now being used, you know, everywhere. And so that the plastics were being produced at the refineries, and it was a byproduct, right? So it's basically carbon-based, which means just like fuel, it's organic. You know, and that's the thing. Now that really drives somebody like that, you know, what's her face? Greta. You know, hey, Greta, did you know that CO2 and gasoline is organic? Right? Right. The tar, it's tar, you know, the La Brea tar pits. It's organic matter. And yes, chemistry is used to do this, that, the other. Okay? I'm not denying the chemistry aspect of it. I'm not denying the chemistry involved in creating these polymers and different things of that sort. Right? But I'm saying that you don't create something from nothing. All right? It's like energy. It's, you know what I mean? It comes from somewhere. All right. And so plastics basically are organic, just like fossil fuels, so to speak. They're not really fossil fuels. That's like, I could get into that would be a whole show on that. But basically, it's organic. So we are a carbon-based life form on a carbon-based planet. It's a carbon-based civilization. As the planet cools, which it's going to cool, not heat up. That's the big lie that's being told to everyone. All right? That, they're trying, that's why they changed it to climate change instead of global warming, right? And nobody even raised an eyebrow on that, right? You think, in any other times, why are you changing it from climate change or global warming to climate change? The reason is because they know that the Pacific Ocean, the conveyor, is on the verge of shutting down, which is going to cause the northern latitudes to pretty much have freeze up. Get cold. It's going to get really cold. And the only thing that's going to keep civilization going during that time, this is prior to the catastrophe. This means over the next 20-some years before the catastrophe. The only thing that's going to keep us going is carbon-based fuels that have the ability and can produce the heat, the energy necessary to warm the northern hemisphere of this planet. People don't realize that. It's not talked about. All of these things, But I didn't finish that mud flood idea. So anyway, what they found was that, underneath Paris or whatever, if you dig down, when they do these digs and they're digging for something or they're opening something up, and they find that there's the city's built on top of another city, but that the city below isn't that old, okay? It's not like ruins of some ancient civilization. It's literally only centuries old. And so the question is, what happened? Well, one of these cycles occurred, and it started, and volcanoes were going off that were cooling the planet. Like right now, this La Palma type of thing, right? There's dozens of volcanoes going off right now. So imagine a few more volcanoes going off. It doesn't have to be a super volcano. We've had those events happen also on the planet. But say enough of volcanoes just keep putting this soot, this ash, this soot, into the air. All right. Well, what that does is it cools the planet. This is another way that the planet gets cooled. And so when the planet gets cooled and there's, weather patterns, clouds form, it's colder weather, you get snow, and so it snows, and in that snow is this ash. And so this snowy ash comes down, and over years, all right, it just piles up. And you reach a time, and you have to remember back in the day, way before us, that, you didn't have modern cities. So people were just shoveling, just trying to keep, to just get around. And so what happened is decades and decades and decades would pass by, and it was snowing, and there was ash in it. And so it was building up. And over centuries, you ended up building up, in feet. And so the bottom layer of the city was eventually, when the snow eventually melted, well, underneath it was just soil. right? And so when you dig down in these cities, I know this is like really a mind blower for people because you have to look at this. You have to see these images, these photos. This is real. This isn't like some kind of like weird internet story. You'll see a layer. It's not like there's buildings, complete buildings there. No, you'll see a layer of a floor, like with windows and a door or a street level that is buried, so that the new street level, the new entrance, right, to a building, to a street where the new street is basically, excuse me, mustache is itchy, is over top of one floor above where it was a couple of centuries ago, just a couple of merely a couple of centuries ago. And in even in San Francisco, and I talked about that. They said after the big fire, they decided to build over the ruins. But when they've dug down to do certain things, to build in new skyscrapers, you have to, go down deep in order to, when you're going to go really high. They've found buildings like a floor under there, like with windows. And the excuse was that, it was after the fire they built over top. But it's like you don't build the whole city over top of, right? It would have been ruins. It wouldn't have been like an actual floor that's untouched, unburned. Do you see what I'm saying? And so the idea is that even these mounds that people talk about, like they try to say there's burial sites, like everything's some kind of burial site or tomb or whatever, You ever notice that? As if anyone born before us, or that all they did was build temples and tombs, right? They can't like give these people credit with the exact same brains as us and could talk exactly the same way, just in a different language, right? But had the same thoughts, process, mathematics, science, in other words, philosophy. They could philosophize, think, ponder, architecturally design, figure things out. They were the same as us. People have been the same, all right, for hundreds of thousands of years. It's the same brain, all right? So, that means they're capable of anything you can do, they could do. They always say, they were building these temples and these were mounds and they were worshiping, some sun god or something like that. Now, maybe they were trying to leave a warning for future generations that the sun does this thing every now and then, and we are trying to leave something here that will last through this cataclysm so that the next generation will have a heads up that this is going to happen. And so anyway, many of us are on to this now. We're seeing these things and discovering it, but we're so close to the next cataclysm and no one's paying attention, and everybody's talking about social issues and CO2. I mean, it would be laughable if it isn't going to spell the end of most life on this planet. And there's close to 8 billion people on this planet, and most of which will not survive, possibly. I don't have any kids. I was married twice, divorced twice, but I never stayed married long enough. We never had kids. And so, but I feel sorry for people who have kids. Those kids are never going to grow up. This thing's going to happen sometime in the next 20 years, more than likely. And if not that, there's going to be some major other cataclysms. It's going to be rough living. Life has already changed for the worse. It's already pretty much, fucked up. Right? And the idea to insult our intelligence and try to tell us that this is based on 0.004 CO2, right? Or it's because people are somehow have some kind of social problems or aren't like have some sort of negative feelings towards some other person or group of people. It's like, all those things are important, but we've all been over. Anybody my age, you've been over that. The civil rights movement ended by the 70s. Okay? The feminist movement, it came and went. It happened. Do you know that there's actually something like, I forget how many more women go to have college degrees now than men. Did you know that? People don't even know that. More and more women are CEOs and stuff like that. There's no such thing as the glass ceiling. And for crying out loud, yesterday I walked up to the convenience store, and on the door they're looking for employees, and it's like, we're paying $12 an hour. All right? It's just a matter of like time. All that stuff's over. People are getting, there's 10 million jobs available. Nobody even wants to take them. I know somebody who just got a $50,000 a year job, and they don't even have to leave their house. Right? And yet there are people out there that don't want to work. And all they're doing is telling people, do this and do that. It's like, you know what I say? Instead of wasting your time at the UN IPCC and all this other stuff, why don't you guys just, focus your energy and your billions of dollars and just end this thing, and let's get back to living, and let's deal with the real potential catastrophe that's coming down the pike. They don't want that. These stooges think they're going to survive. Do you know, like, Jeff Bezos has this, like, bunker? Like, the billionaires know about this, but their major flaw is that they don't understand the intensity of it. Like, they think it's just an Earth catastrophe. So, like, Bezos has this place where he's got, he could be protected from some kind of catastrophe. It's like 1,000 meters or feet away from a launch pad where he could leave the planet, or, jet off to some place. He's got some boat that he could, like, sail on the seas with. These other guys have, like, got all these places in New Zealand. For some reason, they think that place is going to be a safe haven during the next catastrophe. But they're all like, they just don't get it. Because if the 12,000-year cycle that some are predicting happens, there's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. All right? Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. So it's kind of crazy. Anyway. The giver of life, light, heat, and eventually a catastrophe like no other. I mean, this is, it's amazing that how people just aren't really aware of the power of the sun. It's just beyond comprehension. So, yeah, that's basically what I wanted to get across to you guys today. And just in closing, as he says, Yeah, so I called the dentist up the street for those who care about my ongoing tooth saga, you know. The tooth. I don't know what to expect. I know I don't have the money to pay for it, you know. They want to give me a teeth cleaning before they do anything. Why would they need to do that other than to just pilfer money from me? My teeth need they're white. So I'm going to have to argue with them about that. We have to like clean into the, and it's like, I don't want you fucking going into my gums below the teeth line and going in there. I'm not a flosser. I was told a long time ago by a dentist that I trusted. My teeth are very close together, and like he even tried himself. Look at the bottom teeth even. They're even. It's not like there's anything wrong with my smile, But he said, your teeth are like really close together. You can't get, you shouldn't be flossing. You're just going to like pull the enamel off or fuck with them. So I don't floss. And I will not, and I don't intend to floss. And I don't want these people going in with some kind of frickin' clean. I've never had my teeth cleaned in my entire life. And I don't want them going in there and ripping off some kind of enamel, and then suddenly I'm going to end up getting some kind of gingivitis and all kinds of other shit because they're like going to open up a gap, right? And I could see the argument with that. Oh, that can't happen. That doesn't happen. Everyone should floss, and everyone gets their teeth. We have people who get their teeth cleaned here 3-4 times a year. I'm going to have to take a chill pill before I go to that dentist. Luckily, I have one. Clonopin. I'm going to take like a fucking Clonopin before I go. A mild anti-panic attack drug. I happen to have one. Still. Prescription. Left over from a operational thing. One of my... And then they're going to x-ray me like the last thing I need is more radiation. But I'm going to tell them, I'm saying, I'm not walking out of here with you just collecting a check from me for a cleaning and an x-ray and saying, come back next week, whatever. It's like, I'm here for you. I want to go home pain free. So solve the fucking problem. And it ain't because I need a cleaning or an x-ray. My life. Meanwhile, it's raining. I fixed the leaks in my roof. Right? But I found some new ones are starting to pop through in some other areas. So even if I would have paid this guy, a roofing guy who actually didn't even have a ladder big enough to get to the top. But I mean, even if I would have found a roofer, he wouldn't have found there's a couple of new holes have opened up on the other side that he wouldn't have found anyway. And I'm not going to deal with that obviously this morning because I took my shower. I'm trying to stay clean. I have a dentist appointment at noon. A friend of mine's supposed to stop down this morning. I might be going to the store to pick up a few items I need. And anyway, that's that. So, Good morning. Thanks for watching. Visit TonyCaravanLive.com, RockFLUX.com, TonyCaravanLive.locals.com. Remember, if I don't, for some reason, get kicked off of here, go to locals.com, TonyCaravanLive.locals.com, and I'm going to do some live shows there. Get my book, Then What? It's available on Amazon. Get the print edition. That's what a book is. Or go to Great Solar Stuff and get ready for all these things that are happening. So until the next time, I'll let you know the story tomorrow, all about the dentist, whatever